What I'm about to share isn't just another near-death experience or a hallucination caused by trauma. This is a truth that shatters every comforting lie we tell ourselves about violence, duty, and the everlasting consequences of our choices. My name is Amir Kados, and I died on the 15th of October, 2024. For 12 minutes, I saw what lies beyond the veil of death, an experience so profound and terrifying that it completely reshaped not only who I am, but how I now view every breath we take in this world. Before I tell you about my death, you need to understand who I was. I grew up in a modest apartment in Tel Aviv, the son of a career military officer and a high school teacher. My father, Colonel David Kadash, served in the IDF for 30 years, earning commendations for valor that proudly hung on the wall in our living room. Every Shabbat dinner, he'd remind me that serving in the IDF wasn't just about defending our country, it was about defending our right to exist. I never questioned this belief. How could I? It was woven into the very fabric of my existence, as natural as breathing. By the time I was 16, I could field strip an assault rifle blindfolded, a skill my father taught me in our basement, his voice filled with pride. At school, I excelled in physics and mathematics, but my true passion was military history. I spent countless hours studying battle strategies, analyzing conflicts, and dreaming of the day I would wear the uniform and follow in my father's footsteps. My mother, Sarah, was different. While she never openly opposed my military ambitions, I sometimes caught her watching me with concerned eyes as I practiced combat maneuvers in our backyard. "Amir," she'd say, her voice soft but heavy with meaning. "Remember, every soldier on every side has a mother who prays for their safe return." At the time, I dismissed her words as just a mother's natural concern. Now, after everything I've seen, I understand she was speaking to a truth far deeper than I ever realized. I enlisted in the IDF on my 18th birthday, scoring in the top percentile of my training class. The military became my world, its rules and hierarchies as fundamental as the laws of nature. I excelled in urban warfare tactics, earning quick promotions and the respect of my commanding officers. By 23, I was leading my own unit, specializing in counterterrorism operations in high-risk zones. We were good at what we did too good, perhaps. Every successful mission only strengthened our belief in the righteousness of our cause. We saw ourselves as defenders, protectors, warriors standing between chaos and order. When civilians died during our operations, we called it collateral damage, a sterile term that helped us sleep at night. We had our protocols, our rules of engagement, our carefully crafted justifications for every pull of the trigger. I remember one operation particularly well arrayed on a suspected militant hideout in a residential area. Intelligence suggested high-ranking targets were using an apartment building as a base. We moved in at dawn, swift and silent, our night vision equipment turning the world into eerie shades of green. The building's layout matched our briefing perfectly, but something felt off. The rooms were too lived in, too civilian. We found our targets, yes, but we also found family children waking up to the sounds of breaching charges and shouted commands. I remember a young girl, no more than 6, staring at me with wide, terrified eyes as I swept through her bedroom, weapon raised. In that moment, I felt a flicker of doubt, a crack in the armor of my certainty. But I pushed it down, buried it beneath layers of training and duty. We had our orders. The mission was a success. 3 targets eliminated. Minimal civilian casualties. I received a commendation for my leadership. That night, I dreamed of the girl's eyes. It wouldn't be the last time, but I learned to live with the dreams, to compartmentalize them into a box labeled necessary sacrifice. We all did. It was part of being a soldier, we told ourselves. Part of protecting our people, our way of life. The morning of the 15th of October dawned hot and clear, the sun already burning away the last traces of night. By 0600 hours, when I reported for duty, my unit had been tasked with patrolling a particularly sensitive area neighborhood intelligence suggested was being used as a staging ground for attacks. We'd been monitoring the zone for weeks, mapping patterns, identifying potential threats. I remember every detail of that morning with crystal clarity: the weight of my gear, the taste of dust in the air, the way the light reflected off the windows of abandoned buildings. My team moved with practiced precision, each of us knowing our roles without the need for discussion. 6 years of working together had forged us into something beyond mere soldiers. We were a single organism, moving with shared purpose and awareness. We logged suspicious activity, photographed potential hiding spots, maintained our presence. It was the kind of day that could lull you into complacency if you weren't careful. But we were careful. Always careful. That's what makes what happened next so ironic. At 14:32 hours, we received intel about unusual movement in our Sector Nothing concrete. Just the kind of whispered warning that experience teaches you to heed. I adjusted our patrol route, taking us down a narrower street that offered better cover. The buildings pressed in close on either side, their empty windows watching us like hungry eyes. I checked my watch at 14:47, a habit born of military precision. The air felt different, heavier. Later I would wonder if some part of me sensed what was coming, if there had been some divine warning I was too blind to recognize. My radio crackled with routine updates from other units, and I responded automatically, my mind already calculating our next move. That's when I saw it. A package tucked against an abandoned vehicle, partially hidden by debris. Something about its placement sent alarm bells ringing in my mind. I signaled my team to hold position, raising my fist in the universal gesture for stop. Years of training kicked in as I began the standard threat assessment protocol. I never finished it. The world erupted into brilliant, searing light. The last thing I remember thinking, with an almost detached clarity, was, "So this is how it ends." Then darkness claimed me, and I began my journey into realms beyond mortal understanding. The doctors would later tell me that the blast threw me 20 meters, that shrapnel tore through my body armor like paper, that my heart stopped beating for 12 minutes before they managed to revive me. 12 minutes, by earthly reckoning. But time moves differently in the realm I entered. 12 minutes that contained an eternity in eternity that forever changed my understanding of life, death, and the weight of every choice we make. But before I tell you what I saw in death, you need to understand something crucial. I wasn't a bad person. I wasn't a warmonger or a zealot. I was a soldier who believed in duty, a soldier who thought he was protecting his people, a soldier who followed orders. I was someone who thought I understood the difference between right and wrong, someone who believed the end could justify the means, someone who trusted in the system and my place within it. In other words, I was like so many others who carry weapons and follow orders without questioning whether those orders align with a higher, divine truth. What I learned in death shattered every assumption I held about duty, righteousness, and the true nature of our actions in this world. And now, as I prepare to share with you what I witnessed during those 12 minutes, what I learned about the eternal consequences of our choices, I want you to remember who I was. Remember that I wasn't so different from any other soldier or person who justifies their actions through duty or necessity. Because what I'm about to share isn't just my story. It's a warning, a revelation, and a choice that each of us must face before our own time comes. Death, when it came, wasn't like falling asleep. It was like being thrust into a reality far more vivid and real than anything I had ever known in life. The explosion that tore through my body became a distant memory as I entered a realm where physical pain had no meaning but where the soul could suffer in ways deeper than any earthly wound. The first sensation was one of profound displacement. Imagine being stripped of everything you've ever known about existing in a physical form, no heartbeat, no breath, no weight, no sense of up or down. I was consciousness without form, awareness without boundaries. The closest I can come to describing it is like being suspended in an ocean of thick, heavy air. But even that fails to capture the alien nature of that state. In this formless void, I became aware of presences around me. They weren't visible in any conventional way. Rather, I perceived them as concentrations of consciousness, each carrying its own weight of experience and emotion. Some felt familiar, like the essence of soldiers I had known who had fallen in combat. Others were completely foreign beyond my comprehension. They moved through this space like currents in an invisible sea, some with purpose, others lost and drifting. Then came the voices. At first, they were whispers at the edge of awareness, growing into a chorus that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. They spoke in languages I'd never heard, yet I understood every word. They were the voices of the dead, each telling their story, each carrying their truth. Some spoke of regret, others of anger, many of confusion and loss. But what struck me most were the voices of those who had died by violence. They carried a particular resonance, a weight that seemed to pierce through the very fabric of this realm. I began to move, or perhaps it's more accurate to say I was drawn forward. The sensation was like being pulled through a tunnel, but not one made of physical matter. This tunnel was made of memories, emotions, and raw truth. As I traveled through it, I experienced something beyond human comprehension, a complete dissolution of every mental barrier I'd ever built. Every justification, every rationalization, every carefully constructed belief about duty and necessity began to crumble. Along the walls of this tunnel, scenes from my life played out, but not as I had remembered them. I saw every military operation I had been a part of, every shot fired, every order given, but now I saw them from every perspective at once. I experienced the last moments of those who had died as a result of my actions. I felt their fear, their confusion, their anger. I felt the grief of their families, the ripple effects of their deaths through entire communities, entire generations. Then I saw her, the young girl from that pre-dawn raid. But this time, I didn't just see her. I became her. I felt her terror as my own. I experienced the trauma that would shape her entire life, saw how it would affect her children yet unborn, understood how one moment of violence could echo through decades. The weight of this understanding was almost unbearable, yet I couldn't look away. This was truth in its purest form, stripped of all justification and excuse. The tunnel opened into a vast space that defied all earthly physics. It was a city, but not one built by human hands. The structures rose impossibly high, their surfaces shifting and changing as I observed them. They looked like black glass, yet they absorbed light rather than reflecting it. The streets beneath were paved with something resembling polished obsidian, pulsing with an inner red glow like cooling lava. Above, where a sky should have been, there was only void. An endless darkness, alive with a watching presence. Through these streets moved countless souls, each trapped in their own personal revelation of truth. I saw military commanders I had known, politicians whose orders we had followed, arms dealers who had profited from war, each now facing the full reality of their choices. But what haunted me most were the ordinary soldiers, people like me, men and women who had simply followed orders. I watched as they experienced, just as I was, the full weight of every action, every decision, every moment they had chosen obedience over conscience. In this city beyond death, I encountered souls from all sides of every conflict. I saw Israeli soldiers and Palestinian fighters locked in a dance of mutual understanding that had come too late. I witnessed American soldiers facing the civilians they had killed in distant desert wars. Russian troops confronting the consequences of their actions in urban battles. Ancient warriors from conflicts long forgotten by history, all experiencing the true impact of their choices. Then, I saw something that shook me to my core. The innocent ones. They weren't suffering like the others. Instead, they stood as silent witnesses, their presence both gentle and overwhelming. Children who had died in crossfire, families caught in bombardments, civilians in the wrong place at the wrong time. They watched us with eyes that held no hatred only, a deep, profound sadness that cut deeper than any condemnation. A group of children approached me. Among them was a boy I recognized. He had died during one of our operations. When we fired on a building we were told contained enemy combatants. Later, we learned it was a civilian shelter. He looked exactly as he had in that moment, wearing the same torn shirt, his dark eyes wide with the same fear I remembered. But now, those eyes held something else. A wisdom no child should have to possess. He didn't speak with words. Instead, images flooded my consciousness. His mother's face as she sang him to sleep the night before. His sister's laugh as they played soccer in the street that morning. His dreams of becoming a doctor. His confusion and terror in those final moments. I felt everything, every hope that had died with him. Every possibility erased. Every life he would have touched that would now be different because of his absence. Other spirits joined him, each sharing their story, each adding their truth to the overwhelming tapestry of understanding being woven through my soul. I saw the full scope of what we casually called collateral damage, every life cut short, every future erased, every heart broken. But it wasn't just about death. I saw how violence rippled through the living children growing up without parents, communities torn apart by loss, and generations haunted by trauma. In this realm, time held no meaning. I could have experienced 1,000 years of revelation in what earthly time would measure as mere seconds. Each moment brought new understanding, new layers of truth that stripped away more of my former certainties. I saw how every act of violence, matter how justified it seemed at the time sent, ripples through both time and eternity. I understood that what we called necessity or duty often served as a shield against deeper moral truths we didn't want to face. But the most profound realization came when I began to understand the interconnected nature of all souls. In that space beyond physical reality, I could see how we were all threads in a vast tapestry life connected to countless others in ways we could never comprehend in our earthly existence. Every act of violence didn't just sever one thread. It tore a hole in the entire fabric, damaging patterns that stretched far beyond our limited mortal understanding. As this realization deepened, the very atmosphere of the realm seemed to shift. The darkness grew heavier, pressing in around me, as if reality itself was preparing for something monumental. The souls around me began to withdraw, creating a vast, silent space. Even the children who had been my witnesses stepped back, their eyes fixed on something beyond me. And then, I felt it before I saw it. A presence so vast, so ancient, so holy that my very essence trembled in response. This was power beyond comprehension, authority that predated creation itself. In that moment, I understood why the ancient prophets spoke of falling on their faces before the divine. There was no choice involved. My soul couldn't have remained standing in the presence of such overwhelming holiness. The presence filled every corner of the space, and with it came a light. Not the harsh, burning light of the explosion that had ended my earthly life, but something both softer and infinitely more powerful. This light didn't simply illuminate, it revealed. Under its glow, I saw myself as I truly was, stripped of every pretense and self-deception. Every action I had ever taken, every choice I had ever made. Each one became clear its full context, its full consequence. But this wasn't the end of my journey. As the light grew stronger and the presence drew nearer, I realized I was about to face something even more profound, a direct encounter with divine truth itself. And in that moment of complete surrender, when my soul lay bare before the divine, everything changed. The overwhelming light began to concentrate, taking form before me. And there he stood, Jesus Christ. Not as the gentle figure from religious paintings, but as the King of Kings, the judge of all souls, radiating a power that made my military experiences of authority seem like child's play. His appearance defied earthly description. He was light and truth embodied, power clothed in love, justice tempered with mercy. His eyes held the weight of eternity. Yet when he looked at me, it wasn't with condemnation. It was with recognition. And in that gaze, I felt simultaneously exposed and embraced. This wasn't the Jesus of casual religious conversation. This was the living Lord of all creation. And his presence rewrote everything I thought I knew about reality. Amir. He spoke my name, and in his voice I heard the weight of every moment I had lived, every choice I had made. You have seen the truth of your actions. Now see them through my eyes. And in that moment, something extraordinary happened. I began to experience every moment of my military service from his perspective. I felt his heart break with every life taken, his grief for every family torn apart, his sorrow for every soldier on both sides who had forgotten their divine nature in the name of duty. But it wasn't just the obvious moments of violence. I saw how every small choice, every time I chose fear over love, hatred over understanding, had contributed to the larger tapestry of suffering. I gave you life to bring life, he said, his words resonating through every facet of my being. I created you to be a bearer of light, not a dealer of darkness. Each soul you encountered was precious to my friend and foe alike. Every civilian, every soldier, every child caught in the crossfire. They were all my beloved children. The weight of this truth was almost unbearable. I saw how every military operation, every tactical decision, every pulled trigger had rippled through the spiritual realm. Actions I had justified as necessary for security had torn holes in the fabric of divine love. Orders I had followed without question had violated the deeper laws written into the very nature of creation. But then something unexpected happened. Jesus stepped closer, and I felt waves of love washing over me. Not the sentimental love of greeting cards, but something so pure, so powerful, that it began to heal wounds in my soul I hadn't even known existed. This was the foundational force of the universe, the power that held atoms together, the force that gave meaning to existence itself. Your hands have dealt in death, he said, his voice both thunder and whisper. But I am offering you the chance to become a bearer of life. And in that instant, possibilities flooded my consciousness. I saw myself working with trauma survivors, both soldiers and civilians. I saw myself building programs for reconciliation, using my military experience to help others understand the true cost of violence. I saw myself standing between opposing forces not as a warrior, but as a peacemaker. But then his expression grew serious. "Understand this," he said, his voice heavy with meaning. "The path I am showing you will not be easy. Many will not understand. Some will call you a traitor, a coward, a deserter. You will lose friends, respect, position." And then he asked the question that would change everything. "Are you willing to pay this price for truth?" The question hung in the eternal space between us. In that moment, I understood this wasn't just about changing careers or adopting new beliefs. This was about transformation, a complete shift in how I existed in the world. The cost would be enormous. But the cost of returning unchanged, knowing what I now knew, would be infinitely greater. "Yes, Lord," I answered. And with those words, I made the most binding covenant of my life. He smiled then, and it was like watching the dawn break over creation. "Remember this moment," he said. "Remember what you have seen. Remember that every soul you encounter, friend or enemy, ally or opponent, is precious to me. Remember that in my kingdom there is no such thing as acceptable loss." Then he reached out and touched my forehead. In that touch, I felt love. I felt power. I felt purpose pour into my being. But more than that, I felt healing begin. Not just of my physical wounds, but of my soul itself. Years of trauma, hardened emotions, and justified violence began to dissolve. "Go now," he said. "Return and tell what you have seen. Be my witness not just in words, but in the way you live. Show them there is another way." The scene began to fade. The divine presence grew less intense. And though I desperately wanted to stay, I felt myself being pulled way back toward the world of the living. But I carried something with me, something that could never be taken away. The memory of those moments, the truth I had witnessed, the love I had experienced. Then I gasped back to life on the battlefield. Pain ripped through my body. The explosion had left me broken. Later, the medics told me they had been moments away from pronouncing me dead. My heart had stopped beating. For 12 minutes. 12 minutes that held an eternity. 12 minutes that changed the course of my life forever. The physical recovery was brutal, but it was nothing compared to the spiritual and emotional transformation I was going through. How do you return to normal after experiencing the deepest truth of existence? How do you go back to business as usual when you've seen the eternal weight of every action? The answer is, you don't. You can't. Within weeks of my recovery, I submitted my resignation from the IDF. It wasn't an easy decision, and it wasn't well received. My father, a lifelong military man, saw it as a betrayal. My commanding officers thought I was suffering from PTSD and urged me to seek psychological evaluation. My fellow soldiers looked at me with a mix of confusion and contempt. How could I explain to them what I had seen? How could I make them understand that I had witnessed the eternal impact of what we called military necessity? That I had seen how every act of violence, matter how justificator at the fabric of divine love? Instead of trying to explain the unexplainable, I took action. I used my military pension to start a small nonprofit focused on peace building and reconciliation. We began working with former soldiers from both sides of the conflict, creating spaces for dialogue and understanding. We developed programs for children affected by violence, helping them process their trauma and find a path to healing. It wasn't easy. Extremists from both sides sent death threats. Former friends accused me of betrayal. Some family members stopped speaking to me. But for every person who turned away, someone else listened. Slowly, our work began to bear fruit. We saw former enemies become friends. We watched hatred transform into understanding. We witnessed the healing power of truth spoken in love. Each small victory reminded me of what Jesus had shown me, that every soul is precious, that every life we touch ripples through eternity. Today, 5 years after my near-death experience, I continue this work. The memories of what I witnessed haven't faded. If anything, they've only become clearer. Now, I see that my military training wasn't wasted, it was preparation. Preparation for a different kind of battle. I no longer fight against flesh and blood. Now, I fight against the forces of hatred, fear, and division that drive us to violence. I still serve my country, but in a way that aligns with divine truth, not human politics. I still stand for the protection of the innocent, but through reconciliation, not force. I still believe in sacrifice, but now I sacrifice comfort and reputation, not lives and futures. The boy I saw in that realm beyond death, the one who died in our military operation, his eyes still haunt me. But now, they push me forward. not with guilt, but with purpose. Every child we help, every soldier we guide toward peace, every bridge we build between divided communities honors his memory and moves us one step closer to the world Jesus showed me was possible. My name is Kados, and I died on the 15th of October 2024. But more importantly, I was reborn. Not just physically, but spiritually. The truth I witnessed in those 12 minutes has become my life's mission. Whether you believe my story or not, I ask you to consider its message. Every soul is precious. Every action has eternal consequences. And there's always another way if we have the courage to choose it, because one day we will all stand in that light of perfect truth. And when we do, the only question that will matter is, what did we do with the life we were given? Let's remember the words in Isaiah chapter 1, verses 16 to 17. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean, remove the evil of your deeds from before my eyes, cease to do evil, learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, plead the widow's cause. If my story resonated with you, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to NDE Chronicles for more inspiring near-death experience stories. Your support helps reach those who need to hear them. Thanks for being here.